for quite a while now, it's been well documented and predicted that this country, which has always been a white rule majority, is gonna change in 22 years from now, in the year 2042. It will become 50-50, 50% white, 50% non-white. Non-white includes Black, Asian, Hispanic, and anything else. And while there are a lot of white people who embrace that idea and say, hey, I'm cool with that, that's just evolution, no problem, there is a certain contingency that are becoming unhinged about it. Because when you have sat on the throne of power for 401 years, that's how long ago I came here in 1619 as the descendants of slaves. You don't want to get off that power. Heck, we can see that right now. We got somebody who's only been in power for 4 years. He doesn't want to get off the throne, right? So, that's nothing new. This country was built on a two-tier society, white supremacy and slavery. And as we progress through the years, we progress like this, perhaps like this, but never like this. Beautiful. Okay, and so when you've had that kind of power for that long, it's hard to relinquish it. So that's going to happen. We're going to be 50-50, and I think some of these people they're fearing that. They're fearing retaliation. They're fearing losing power. They're fearing white guilt, all kinds of stuff, and so they're acting out. In our recent history, as long as I can remember, we've had an administration that, for lack of a better term, I don't want to say promotes it, but encourages it, this acting out through dog whistles and other things and his own behavior, that people interpret that as, we need to take charge here. And so, we have things like Charlottesville. We have other things, that have gone on. We have people trying to run his opponent's bus off the road, and then him tweeting, I love Texas, because that's where it happened. These kinds of things are encouraging to people of that mindset. And they know that if their candidate does not win this upcoming election, they're going to have to fight extra hard to maintain control. If he does win the election, they know they're only going to have 4 more years to fulfill their agenda, because the next he can only run for 8 years, and the next candidate after this 4-year stint probably would not be like our current president. So they, as long as he's there, they can get away with stuff, or at least they feel they can, and they will be going full thrust ahead to fulfill their agenda. With that 2042 looming just 2 decades from now, they are feeling panicky. You see all these groups, springing up and trying to recruit, come join us. We're going to take our country back. We're going to make America great again. We're going to build that wall, get rid of all these people, et cetera, et cetera. And people are running and joining these groups out of fear. And then when the group does not act and do anything, they get frustrated and they say, you know what? If the Klan can't do it, or the neo-Nazis can't do it, or the alt-right can't do it, I'll do it myself. And that's when they go and act on their own. They walk into a Black church, like in Charleston, South Carolina, and shoot up the people conducting Bible study. Or they walk into a synagogue, Tree of Life up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and shoot up the Jewish people. They go into the Walmart in El Paso, Texas, and shoot up the Mexican people. And this is all in an effort to cleanse their white land, their white homeland of non-whites. And this is all is a precursor to what they are looking for, called RAHOWA, RAHOWA, which stands for Racial Holy War, or in short, the race war. I've been hearing about the race war since 1974, when I was in high school, and I met with the head of the American Nazi Party, and he told me, your skin color will be your uniform. And that was the first time I ever heard of a race war. And I was incredulous, but since that time, I've learned a lot. And so these people are acting out as lone wolves. And as we get closer and closer to 2042, unfortunately, we're going to see more and more of these lone wolves because they're becoming unhinged. And in fact, we saw one just about, about a month ago now, where that young boy from Illinois, 17-year-old boy, came into Wisconsin, into Kenosha, Wisconsin, and shot those 3 protesters, killing 2 of them and blowing the third one's arm off with his long gun. And then he went back to Illinois. I think his name was Kyle Rittenhouse. That's a lone wolf, you know? And so while we have intelligence agencies that have operatives that can infiltrate these groups, just like, you know, there was somebody who infiltrated the militia that was going to kidnap and kill the governor of Michigan. These operatives can foil those plots, but you cannot infiltrate a lone wolf. It's only one person. So, you know, we're faced with that. And that's why we have to be vigilant. We have to be proactive. And being proactive requires us meeting with these people and having these conversations and getting this education out here. Because if you remember 1999, people were freaking out about the year 2000, called it Y2K. And they were flipped out because they thought their VCR was no longer going to work, and the world was coming to an end. You know, it was apocalypse. They're taking all their money out of the bank and hiding it in their house because the banking system was going to crash and all kinds of mayhem. Of course, it never happened. But 2042 is the white supremacist Y2K in this country. And the anxiety is very high because it's not that far away. And if they don't do anything to stop this, what they call the browning of America or white genocide through miscegenation, their window of opportunity is going to close. And right now they figure they got that 4 years if their candidate gets in to accomplish this. So this is why, you know, we are on the cusp of a very volatile situation in this country, and it must be addressed proactively and not reactively. Absolutely. And just to be clear, you know, Donald Trump did not invent white supremacy or racism. It's been around long before him. Before him, people were accusing Obama of the same thing. It's been around long before Obama, like I said, 401 years. And people are just freaking out over that. But certainly this current administration definitely encourages it. And yes, you know, we have extremists on both sides, the right and the left. And how to combat this polarization is to strengthen the middle. Those who are kind of on the fence, they're not too far right, they're not too far left. Strengthen them, pull them upwards, all right? And in doing so, they will suck in the fringe into them, because these people, when they realize they are a minority, they are already defeated. So they want to belong to something. So when you strengthen that middle, you're pulling from the outside in, and you bring the middle up and give them power and teach them, because they are a lot easier to reach than someone who's on the far right or the far left. So when you do that, you strengthen the middle, educate them, have them come together and make those compromises. It sucks in the people on the edges and brings them in. That would be one of the solutions, but not by itself. What we see in our country, the importance of not silencing people. The importance of not silencing people is this, because you're simply driving them underground if you try to silence them. And it works like a pressure cooker. And a pressure cooker can only be on so long before you have to release that valve. And if that pressure valve is not released, sort of like a radiator cap, it's going to blow right up, you know. And we saw that in Charlottesville. So we should have learned our lesson there. We should have learned our lesson in many places. You know, people keep wondering, why do people keep burning down cities when a Black person gets shot? That's another pressure cooker. You should learn vicariously, but people don't seem to learn that lesson. But they're learning it, they're beginning to learn it now. And here's what was so important about not shutting down people and coming together and communicating is this. 20 years ago, Barack Obama could never have won the White House. Attitudes were not present to allow a Black man to sit in the White House, all right? By 2008, there were enough attitudes that were willing to vote for Barack Obama. And these attitudes that I'm talking about are the attitudes of white Americans. It was not Black Americans that put Obama in the White House. It was white Americans, because we only make up 12% of the population. So, and of that 12%, not all of us are eligible to vote. Some of us are not old enough. Some of us are not registered. Some of us are felons, so our vote is taken away from us, our right to vote, et cetera. So all 12%, let's just say if all 12% could vote, including little newborn babies could vote, that still would not be enough Black votes to get that man in the White House. We still needed an abundance of white votes. So by 2008, there were enough white people of the mindset, hey, you know what? I like that guy's policy. Check, he's got my vote. And that's what got him in. That collective voice of Blacks and whites working together. In the past, during the Civil Rights Movement from 1955 with Rosa Parks and on through the 1960s with Dr. King, we've always had white people who have participated in our protests, our demonstrations, our boycotts, our sit-ins, et cetera. Not an abundance of them, but we've always had some who were progressive enough to see, that equality was the right way to go, and they participated. But never before have we seen this many white people out in the streets marching with these Black people for equal justice. And we saw this in the wake of the George Floyd lynching. And, as a result of this, in the past, when the powers that be, and I'm talking about the white establishment, looked at these marches and things like that, they saw a sea of Black people with a few white people sprinkled in. And so their ears were plugged. They shut us down. They didn't want to hear enough is enough, no justice, no peace. They didn't listen. And it resulted in a lot of destruction and burning down buildings, et cetera. Today, these same powers that be are looking at these marches and protests, and they're seeing many, many, many people who look just like them. So as a result, they're pulling out their earplugs or else putting in their hearing aids, and they're listening. And as a result of this, changes are happening a lot faster today than ever before. We're seeing police officers get arrested, get charged, get terminated, convicted, et cetera, of this. It's that collective voice, that same collective voice that made a historical change in our presidency. We have not, all we've seen from George to George, from Washington to Bush. After that last George, we got a Black man. But it was that collective voice that did it. The ripple effect that we're seeing today, we've never seen such a big ripple effect. These protests after the lynching of George Floyd were geared predominantly towards the police. But as a ripple effect, we see NASCAR taking down the Confederate flag. We see the state of Mississippi, of all places, removing the Confederate flag out of their main flag. We see Uncle Ben's and Aunt Jemima food brands changing their brands. We're seeing legislation to take down statues. All this happened with these protests that were geared towards the police. What was different about these protests than the ones we've been crying about for 400 years? the collective voice was there. We need to focus on, and we need to strengthen that collective voice and not divide it. And there are groups out there, and some on the left included, that are being very divisive, because the coronavirus is kind of a bittersweet thing. The bitter part, of course, is 230,000 Americans have died as a result of this virus. And all of those did not have to die had we been proactive, as we should have been, and not calling it a hoax and not wearing masks and doing all the things that we've been advised by scientists and doctors. But the other part of it is there was a lockdown. People are home. They're not at work. What do they do when they can't go to work and they can't go out in the streets? Places are closed. They watch TV. And they watched the lynching of George Floyd unfold before their eyes. And now they have time to do that introspection and say, oh my God, that's what they've been talking about for years. I can't believe I'm seeing this. I must do something. And despite the health danger to their own physical well-being from this virus that was out there, they went out on the streets and marched night after night after night, and they're still doing it to bring about that change. Again, that collective voice. We've always marched, but now the people that we need are marching with us. And that's why we need to make sure that we keep that intact and not let it go back to what it was 20 years ago. Well, one of the best ways is to edify and promote parallel networks that specializes in combating this type of racism. And I think you're right about the term anti-racist. It's getting a negative connotation. We know what it means. We know what it's about. It's not necessarily about violence and this, that, and the other, and go out and kill all racists and punch a Nazi in the face and all this kind of stuff. Yes, that is anti-racist behavior, but it's also counterproductive anti-racist behavior. So, and then you have other groups, one being like Antifa and some other ones that just are not going to tolerate racism, and they're going to combat it physically, etc. Again, that's another anti-racist approach, but that's what gives the people on the other side the definition of anti-racism, because they're going to see the negative. So perhaps change the narrative from anti-racism to perhaps pro-humanity. Rather than be anti anything, be pro something. That would be one thing, because it's sort of like this. Words are very powerful, depending upon what words you choose. When you're asked to describe a group of predominantly white men who go out in the woods in camouflage, and they dislike the government, and they practice all these paramilitary maneuvers and survivalist tactics and all that, the name they're given is militia, right? But when you have a group of Black people who do the exact same thing, they're not called militia, they're called militants. And even though it's the same thing, the term militant has a little more negative connotation than the term militia. So I'm just making that analogy from pro-humanity to anti-racist. It's the same thing, but one, as a result of a lot of violence that has followed in anti-racism, it is given that term sort of a negative connotation.